Okay, good evening, everyone. We're going to start the evening by setting our motivation. We're going to be reviewing the Mind Training Like the Rays of the Sun book for the next 4 weeks. And the section of the book that I'm doing, this was Venable's conclusion to teaching this section, parts of it. So she talks about how are we going to deal with the amnesia of forgetting that we're in samsara and that it's a dire situation. So one moment we kind of get that, and then the next moment or the next day, but usually it's just the next hour, it's kind of like gone and we're off to the next thing. And as we cultivate doing meditation, we see that sometimes we have quite a feel for, or some sense of renunciation of the situation that we are in cyclic existence. And the next moment, we just feel once again like this solid, inherently existent person that's totally in control. And this is the force of ignorance and the influence of ignorance. And this isn't the deeper fundamental ignorance, but this is like an effect of ignorance. This amnesia, total cloud of amnesia. And this is why we do meditation repeatedly on topics. And this is why we listen to teachings. So tonight, as we spend this hour together, let's just think about waking up. And make that our motivation, to wake up and try to be able to keep the bigger picture in mind. Try to find a way out of all the various sufferings that we have and open our mind to see all other beings in the same situation. So let's think about using this time to generate the mind of bodhicitta, the awakening mind, wishing to free every sentient being from suffering and becoming enlightened in order to do that. It's kind of hard, both on the cushion and off the cushion, to keep the mind with this bigger perspective. Instead, we get caught up in just kind of small daily things, like what's happening between me and another person or whatever. The topic that we're going to go into tonight is like really the wake-up call. I love this topic, actually. It's sometimes called the 4 thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. In this book, Mind Training Like Rays of the Sun, it's a commentary on the 7-point thought transformation, written by a student of Lama Tsongkhapa's. And this whole section that we're going to talk about tonight is about one of the slogans. There's, I don't even know how many, probably, I don't know, maybe 70, 80. I'm not sure how many slogans there are in the 7-point thought transformation. There's quite a few. But this whole section has just one. It's the whole part of, it's called First Train in the Preliminaries. So these are the preliminary things to cultivating the mind of awakening, or bodhicitta, and the other mind training practices. And there's 4 main topics that are involved in this, but there's other things as well that these pages elucidate. So I'll just read a little bit first from the book. So first, train in the preliminaries. This involves contemplating the significance and rarity of life as a free and fortunate human being, contemplating impermanence and death, which leads to the realization that our lives can end at any time, and thinking about causes and results of actions and the vicious nature of cyclic existence. So these are the 4 thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma, thinking about our precious human life, thinking about impermanence and death, thinking about karma or actions and karma and its results, actions and deeds and results, and thinking about the disadvantages of cyclic existence. And tonight I'm kind of planning on spending most of the time with the first 2, but we'll touch on all 4. And we'll also go on through a few other things that were in this section of the book. And then in the next 2 weeks, we'll be covering the sections on conventional bodhicitta, and then the 4th week we'll be covering the section of the book on ultimate bodhicitta. So that's the game plan. The first thing that Venerable wanted to explain that in the Lam Rim, it's set out slightly differently, but it's not that different from the thought training teachings. The first 3 of those contemplations are in the initial level of practitioner, and then they don't have in the thought training, but they imply a couple topics that are in the Lam Rim. So after you think about the precious human life, its rarity, its meaning, and how hard it is to obtain, and then the fact that we're mortal and not going to stick around forever, then in the Lam Rim, they go into topics about the lower realms, and they go into the topic of refuge. And we want to, usually the part on the lower realms, people kind of skip over a little bit, but I think over the years I've decided that I don't really need to believe in the lower realms to get the effect, at least some effect, because having just heard about them so many times and just thinking about the human realm and the things that I can see in the animal realm and this realm, and it still, I think, has an effect on the mind. So I think you can kind of delve into those without having to take them on as how real is this and all that. And Venerable always says that, they're as real as probably anything else. How real is our day to day? But I find it helpful. I mean, I realize in looking at this that just thinking about the hell realms or the hungry ghost realms or in seeing the animal realm, it has an impact on my mind, even though I don't know if those exist. But just thinking about the kind of life that you'd have and putting yourself in that kind of situation, it definitely has an impact on the mind. So I think you can kind of go there without having to really buy it all. So the other topic about refuge is also incredibly important, and of course in the thought training they're assuming they're doing this, although they don't mention it specifically. But this is something that comes about slowly and deepens as you progress along the path. And first, when you take refuge, you're entering the teachings, but as you stay with them, this is what allows you actually to go deeper into the teachings and gives you a sense of support, because as you study and think about it and use the teachings and find how they have an influence on your life, then you develop a kind of confidence or faith slowly, and that's based on your own wisdom from checking things out and your understanding. And with that is, a feeling of support, really, because the things that work, and you know that from your own experience. So that helps you to want to listen to and push yourself a little bit more, or look into things a little bit more that you maybe don't understand at first. So this feeling of relying on the Buddha and the Dharma, the teachings and the Sangha, actually can add a lot of stability to our practice and to our life in general. So I think that most of us can get a little sense of that just from our beginning level of practice. So then the teaching starts, the text goes on, from these basic practices up to training in the ultimate awakening mind, which is the wisdom realizing emptiness, the practice can be divided into two, the actual meditation session and the period between sessions. The actual session is divided into three, so at the beginning of each session we do like a preparation where we take refuge and generate bodhicitta, then we do our meditation, and then we do a dedication. And this topic of how we go about our sessions, I think, is very useful to study. It helps to explain kind of the bigger picture of what we're doing, because all the topics, these four topics, are things that we learn about and meditate on. But there are a lot of, it's a small chapter, but there's a lot of teachings about how we set up our time in session and out of session. So it's said there's the meditation time and there's the break time, because it's all one thing. You're always practicing the Dharma, whether you're on the cushion or off the cushion. You're trying to have the attitude that you're holding things in both, and what you do in one will influence the other. And then the text says, firstly, as the life story of Dharmamita of Sumatra, which is Sir Lingpa, which is the teacher of Atisha from the Golden Isle, as this story shows, we should decorate the place, arrange representations of the three jewels, offer a mandala, and complete the 6 kinds of conduct, up to the request that the 3 great purposes shall be fulfilled. These 3 purposes are of self, others, and both. So I thought this was important to think about, that even Sir Lingpa, who Atisha feels is his main teacher of 100 and some teachers, even he did these 6 preparatory practices. And we sometimes kind of think, oh, those are not that important, and we kind of go on to the next thing. But this whole topic of how we go about our session is very important. And if Sir Lingpa does it, then I think we should at least give it a look. And then the actual meditation session, the text goes on and says, secondly, during the actual meditation session, we should reflect that throughout beginningless time we have been under the power of the mind, and the mind in turn has been overcome by afflictions. And these afflictions are what have given rise to the actions that are the root of cyclic existence. And from these have arisen the various types of sufferings that we experience in the round of existence. So this is basically our life from moment to moment, and what the 12 links kind of explain. So to turn away from such tendencies, we must try to develop an independent, controlled, and workable mind that will stay where it is put, or go where it is sent. To acquire such a state of mind, it's necessary to focus on the specific subject of meditation without being distracted by either laxity or excitement. These meditations should follow the given order, and except for the training and the perfection of concentration, they were all analytical meditations. So that's the second point, is in the actual meditation session, what the heck are we doing? And so needing to learn about analytical meditation so that we can learn to work with our mind. The whole point is to transform the mind and use the Dharma kind of like as the template. And then the other main kind of meditation is concentration, keeping a mind that's focused and stable. And then at the end of the path, you combine those two. So, so I think the point that Geshe Sopa makes quite clear is that both those kind of meditations depend upon each other. You just don't do stabilizing meditation your whole life and not do any of the analytical meditations, at least in this tradition. because you need to have both of them working together in order for your Dharma practice to get to a point where you can actually subdue the mind. It's not just a matter of being able to concentrate the mind, but we want to subdue and transform our mind. And so it's not just a matter of concentration alone. And by taking these various topics of the thought training, Lam Rim, and integrating them in our lives, and then habituating ourselves to them, our mind will change. And then the third goes on, the text says, thirdly, in conclusion, we should make perfect prayers, such as the prayer of good conduct, or king of prayers, and so forth. We should practice in this way 3 times during the day and 3 times during the night. During meditation sessions, the senses should be controlled, mental alertness and introspection maintained, and a balanced diet observed. Effort should be made to become an unsleeping yogi, and you should know how to use the period of sleep to develop calm abiding and special insight, as taught by the exalted Asanga. So that's kind of like, to me, like lifetimes of work, but this is kind of where we're headed, according to Lama Tsongkhapa, and he's taking it from his teachers. This one from Asanga. So then now the text goes into the explanation of these 4 preliminaries, which is the slogan, first train in the preliminaries. So in order to do this tonight, I'd like to first do this a little bit more, interspersing a little bit of contemplation. So I'd like people to just take a moment to bring to mind an actual situation in your own life of something that's maybe a little disturbing, something that you're working on with another, in relationship to another person, maybe like a coworker, a family member, maybe holding a grudge. Bring a specific situation to mind that you can use as a touch point, so we can get a feeling, hopefully, as we go through the points. So take a moment to do that. So now try to keep that solidified. The person, the situation, maybe the afflictions you're working with around it. Stories you're telling yourself, whatever. And now you can put that in your back pocket. We'll bring it out again later. So the first topic is life as a free and fortunate human being. And this is basically having the 8 states of, where we're not, how do you say that? Being free of 8 states that don't have any leisure. Basically, this is the basis that we have for practicing the Dharma and becoming liberated. We're having these 8 states of being free from 8 states without leisure and possessing 10 beneficial circumstances. So basically, if you think about being in one of these 8 situations, you can see there's no way you can practice the Dharma. If you hold wrong views and believe very stubbornly that there's no cause and effect, or that our ethical actions have really no implications or no ramifications for our life, things that are totally by chance. If you have that kind of view, you actually won't be able to practice the Dharma. You have to have some thought of cause and result. If everything's just by chance, then it really doesn't matter what you do. So there's no ethical dimension to our lives. If you're born as an animal, you won't be able to really contemplate these topics at all. I mean, you can listen to them like our cats do, but, you know, if you're born as a hungry ghost or as a hell being, both of those situations, it's just so intense that you don't have the leisure to put your mind on other things. You're kind of caught up in what you're experiencing so much you can't get outside of it. Same thing with being a long-lived God. You're just in the deluxe, the realm of sense pleasure, and you're just overtaken by it, so your mind isn't going to turn to anything else. Or if you're in a place where the Buddha's teachings don't exist, or if you don't have enough intelligence, like, you know, people who are developmentally delayed sometimes, if it's quite severe, they wouldn't be able to contemplate these things. Or if you're in a place where the Buddha's teachings aren't taught at all. So we are free of that. And then Venerable goes on to make the point that, yeah, we are free of that, but it doesn't last forever. And that's the thing where we can get lulled. When this life stops, everything is going to change. And then we also have the 10 beneficial circumstances. So the first ones are like our personal opportunities in life. We are humans. We are in a place where there's the teachings, a central land. We do have sound sense organs. You can hear me, you can listen, you can think, you can see, or at least you can find some way to get the teachings in. If you can't see, maybe you can listen. If you can't hear, you can read. Maybe you have to have some way to take them in. You're not holding wrong views, or another way it's also put is, in another version, I guess, is you haven't committed the 5 heinous actions. And you have some faith in the teachings. You have some kind of conviction. And then the 5 circumstantial opportunities, which are basically the circumstances that are around us, or that the Buddha has appeared, the Buddha has taught, the teaching still exists. And there are followers. So there, and that's sometimes said that there's at least 4 monastics, a community of a sangha. And then there's the presence of sincere patrons and benefactors. So when they give this teaching, they always talk about how it's so useful for depression and for self-pity. And I think it's important to contemplate those things, but I think the part that stands out for me the most is when they talk about how this is the essence of our life and what that means. So we'll come, I don't know, so often in the verses they say this. Like here's, the text says, thinking about this will give rise to a wish to take the essence of this teaching to heart. And Geshe Sopa says, take the essence of this opportune life. And he talks about essence being in the sense of like the, what do you call it, the heart or the pith part of a grain of rice. It's the nourishing part, the essential nourishing part of a grain. The husk is on the outside. This is what nourishes us. And so, would you say that the heart of your life, the most nourishing thing in your life, are temporary achievements? I mean, this is the question I ask myself. This is the way I work with this topic. What is that thing that nourishes us and gives meaning to our lives? In these teachings, they always say it's some version of like the mind of bodhicitta or highest enlightenment. But really, you know, thinking about making your life meaningful can really, I think it comes down to practicing virtue, finding in whatever way that may be, So that can be merit, purification, just trying to plant these seeds of the Dharma into our mind, making offerings. There's so many ways to do this. Shantideva says that, so if when I have found such leisure as this, I do not attune myself to what is wholesome, there could be no greater deception and no greater folly. So attuning ourselves to what is wholesome. Those are the words that really stand out for me. So in our life, our daily life, day in, day out, in our relationships with others, trying to work with our mind, transform our mind, keep our precepts, make the Dharma, just try to imbue our lives with the Dharma in every aspect. And then Shantideva goes on to say, and if, having understood this, I still continue to be slothful, when the hour of death arrives, tremendous grief will rear its head. It is as though I were mindless, like one hypnotized by a spell, not even knowing what causes my confusion or what is dwelling inside me. And I think this speaks to the ignorance that Venerable started this talk out with. It can come in, I think, many ways. So in the text, they told some funny stories about this that I liked. So I thought I'd read these, because I had forgotten about them completely. These were from Potawa. Once a man was plowing his field when he turned up an earthworm. To his amazement, the red worm stood on end and prostrated to a nearby image of the Buddha. It is equally rare for someone like us, just coming up from a bad state of rebirth, to turn up as a human being and do something positive and spiritually beneficial. On another occasion, a man with no legs was resting on the edge of a short drop. I think that would be a short cliff. He lost his balance and, falling off, landed on the back of a wild donkey beneath. The startled beast ran off at a gallop, and the man hung on for dear life, shouting with glee, "If I don't enjoy it now, when else will a cripple like me get the chance to ride on a donkey?" Likewise, we should see how rare our lives are and take joyful advantage of them. And the next one is, once a man from Tang came to Lhasa. He had never eaten fish before, so when he got the chance, he gorged himself on this rare treat. Naturally, it made him sick, but as he was about to vomit, he tied a rope around his neck so as not to waste any of what he had eaten. We should be as unwilling to waste even a moment of our precious human lives. Okay. The last one. Those are my three favorite of that. I thought that was funny. I was like, okay, guys, let's have a little comic relief here. So the Atisha says, making our life wholesome and taking the essence. Atisha says that what is it really to practice the Dharma? It's to transform your mind and abandon the 8 worldly concerns. That's the essence of Dharma practice. So, we always, if we're caught up with this life, we're always kind of dealing with the 8 worldly concerns. So that contemplating these things and seeing how they really don't have this long-term meaning helps us to abandon the obsession with the pleasures that we have in this life, seeing them as temporary. So I think it's good really to think about that. What is the essence? What is the most nourishing thing? And that's what I took into my meditation when thinking about this, thinking about experiences in my life that I really felt were very nourishing and very meaningful. And what was it that was in those that was in line with the Dharma? What was it? What was the essence of those experiences that made them valuable? And the other thing about a precious human life that I think it's useful to review is the contemplation on the rarity and the difficulty of getting the causes together is how this part is done. So what are the causes of a precious human life? And there's three main things. The first is ethical conduct. We have to live our lives like, this is where they talk about usually the 10 non-virtues. But we have to abandon things that are going to send us into lower realms, and also are completely causes of suffering. And then we have to practice the 6 far-reaching attitudes or practices, which we're going to have a retreat on this month. So what, I think Venerable added this part too. She went into a lot of detail. Sometimes the text had 3 pages and she spent, I think, 3 weeks on it, going over different things. But she mentioned that ethical conduct is what gives us a human body. Generosity gives us enough wealth so we're not starving and we're able to practice. Fortitude and patience give us a pleasant appearance so that people won't run away from us. Joyous effort gives us the tenacity to really stick to the practice in a future life. Concentration gives us the ability to stabilize the mind. And wisdom gives us the ability to discern the teachings and appreciate the teachings in a future life. So these are like the ethical conduct, in a way, is like the cause, and these are the conditions. That's how it's described for a precious human life. And then the third thing is sincere dedication prayers. So may I meet a Mahayana teacher early in all of my lives. So we direct our efforts. So check up, is what she says. How many people have this? How many people avoid the 10 non-virtues? And worse than that, look in your own mind and what is going on in your own mind. And would you, if you think about what you're thinking about all day, would you want that like put out on a radio so everybody could hear? I don't think so. So you might, well, that's a side thing, but we read that biography once of Ajahn Mun, who was apparently clairvoyant. So all his disciples, he always knew what they were thinking. That would be scary. So, as we think about, how easy is it to be generous, and how are we dedicating, and what's really going on in our minds and everything, basically what we want to come to the conclusion is that the masters have not told us this just for the heck of it. These are the causes. We need to kind of like look at them and see if we can buy into this. And then it said, so the first person I had heard say this was Kinzer Jampa Tekchok, but now I've read it in a number of places. What is so fortunate about the life that we have right now? And he says it's not really who we are, it's what we can do. It's what we can do with this life. That just so much stayed with me, because I'm always like about appreciation or reputation or accomplishing things, and it's like very up to this life, that's just where my mind was. It was so much that way when he taught this, and he just said, it's not what it's about at all. What makes this life meaningful is what we can do with it. And this is basically in the teachings, it's about creating the causes for precious human rebirth, and then creating the causes for liberation and enlightenment more so. And then even moment by moment, we can practice these thought training teachings, and we can take every moment in our lives and then make it meaningful. And so that's what the teachings talk about, as what is precious. So in that perspective, our life has really a lot of purpose and meaning. And the reason we're doing this contemplation right now is because the bigger picture is trying to develop this awakening mind. But we have to create the causes for that, and one of them is looking at the precious human life. So now go back to your situation you were thinking about. Pull it out of your pocket and revisit it, and try to have your mind, this big mind, and look at the situation and see just how important it is and what your perspective on it is. How much energy and attention it really deserves. What are we doing with our time? When I was thinking about this, had this image. I used to say to myself, I feel like I'm getting pushed around like a chess piece. It's when I feel like other people are trying to control me. And I was thinking about something that was like 20 years ago, so it didn't have much charge, but it was kind of fun to think about. And then I think about this, I'm like, I think the mind of tolerance instead of anger is just so readily apparent then, because it's just a completely different perspective. Like, it's just like, what does this stuff matter? It's just my mom didn't like the clothes I wore all the time. She always was making me wear different clothes when I was quite young, and would throw away some of my clothes. They were too ragged, Like, it's trying to control me. Okay, so we thought a little bit about a precious human life. And then the next topic is about death and impermanence. And I really enjoyed what Venerable said about this. Let's see, I think this first this is the text first. We should think about being unmindful of death, about how being unmindful of death is the main cause of the whole heap of mistakes performed in this and future lives, and how familiarity with death and impermanence is advantageous, the sole means for achieving everything excellent in this and future lives. And Venerable goes on to explain that, when we're not aware of this, we just feel like we're going to live forever. We feel like this solid, permanent person. And then, it's like we just don't really care about the long-term effects of our actions. We don't even think about them. We're just, we're on a different page completely. We're just completely involved with the appearances of this life. And it's very strong, and it feels very real and permanent. And so we just get everything I can now. And if we can't get what we want, we get angry. So that's why we think about death and impermanence. It's like another way to wake us up. And so some people might not relate to this. Some people might, but this is one way to wake up. This is called Heart Spoon, Encouragement Through Recollecting Impermanence. And this is by Pabonka Rinpoche. It's a poem. And it's in the Tibetan graphic way of dealing with the body after death isn't part of this too. Because for people who don't know, especially in the winter in Tibet, you can't bury people who are dead, so they just kind of cut up the body, and sometimes they stuff them into holes in the ground, and stuff. But so they don't do it. I don't know how they do it now, but there also wasn't much wood. So that's part of the imagery in here. Ah, the hurt, kind Lama, look to this pitiful one. How I behave and how I've cheated myself my entire life. Please look upon this mindless one with compassion. The essential advice to give to yourself, Heart Spoon. Keep it deep within your heart. Don't be distracted. Don't be distracted. Reflect upon the state of your life from the essential drop at your heart. Since beginningless cyclic existence, which hasn't ended up until now, though you've experienced countless cycles of rebirths, just so many variations on happiness and pain, you've achieved not the slightest benefit from them. And though at present you've attained leisure and fortune so difficult to find, always till now they're finished and have been lost, have been empty and without meaning. Now if you care for yourself, the time has come to practice the essence of future happiness, virtuous actions. You appear so capable, smart, and clever, but you're a fool as long as you cling to the child's play of the appearances of this life. Suddenly you're overwhelmed by the fearful Lord of Death, and without hope or means to endure, there's nothing you can do. This is going to happen to you. Because you think, I'm not going to die for some time now, I'm not going to die for some time now, while you're distracted by the never-ending activities of this life. Suddenly, the fearful Lord of Death arrives, announcing, now it's time to die. This is going to happen to you. Though you make arrangements saying tomorrow and tomorrow, just then, suddenly you have to go. This is going to happen to you. And without choice, leaving behind in disarray your left off work, left food and drink, you have to depart. This is going to happen to you. There's no time other than today to spread your bedding and go off to sleep. Upon your last bed, you fall like an old tree, and others, unable to turn you with their lily-soft hands, tug at your clothes and blanket. This is going to happen to you. Even if you completely wrap your body in last, under and outer clothes, still you have no freedom to wear them other than just today. And when that body becomes rigid as earth and stone, you behold for the first time your own corpse. This is going to happen to you. Though you struggle to speak your last words, your will and expressions of sorrow, pitifully your tongue dries up and you can't make yourself clear. An intense sadness overwhelms you. This is going to happen to you. Though others put your final food, holy substances, and relics with a trickle of water into your mouth, you're unable to swallow even a single drop, and it overflows from the corpse's mouth. This is going to happen to you. Though surrounded by a circle of close relatives, heart friends, and those near to your heart, and even though they're loving and distressed at the ending of your being together while crying and clinging, just then you have to separate forever. This is going to happen to you. Though you experience horrific hallucinations like a turbulence of waves and are overcome by unbearable, excruciating pain, pitiful though you may be, there's nothing to be done. The appearances of this life are setting like the sun. This is going to happen to you. Through the unbearable compassion, your Lama and Vraja friends plead in your ear for a critical, virtuous thought to arise. And even though they do so with loving minds, there's no hope, it's unthinkable. This is going to happen to you. With an expelled rasping sound, soar, soar at the time of death, the movement of your breath builds faster and faster, then breaks like the string of a violin, and at the end of your life, has come to its close. This is going to happen to you. There'll come a time when your cherished and sadly lost lovely body is called corpse, disgusting and rotten, and a time when your body can't bear even rough, and a time when your body, which can't bear even rough bedding and mattress, is laid out on bare ground. This is going to happen to you. There'll come a time when your body, which can't bear even a thorn, is chopped to pieces, and from the bone its flesh is torn, and a time when your body, which can't stand even fleas and lice, is devoured by birds and dogs till nothing's left. This is going to happen to you. Though you go to so much trouble blowing purr, purr, and dressing your body in the finest clothes, there'll come a time when that body is placed in a burning house, and your body, which can't tolerate even the fire of a glowing stick of incense, must be burned in the midst of a fiery conflagration. This is going to happen to you. There'll come a time when entering into roaring flames, all your flesh and bones are burned and reduced to a pile of ash, or a time when your body, which can't bear even heavy cloth, is wedged tight into a hole in the ground. This is going to happen to you. There'll come a time of the announcing the deceased, him or herself, at the beginning and end of your sweet name. This is going to happen to you, in a time when the area is filled with the sobbing sounds of your affectionate, close companions in a circle of servants. This is going to happen to you. There'll come a time when your clothes, hats, possessions, and livestock will be divided up with nothing left in the four directions and corners. And there'll come a time when in total despair, alone, you reach the passage to the intermediate state. This is going to happen to you. The terrors of the four fearful enemies descending upon you are going to come, the appearance of being trapped under a mountain of packed rock and rubble and buried beneath a furious avalanche of earth. What to do? The appearance of being set adrift on the surface of a vast sea and carried away by violent swirling waves. What to do? The experience of your heart and ears being split open by the sizzling and crackling sounds of a fiery conflagration. What to do? The fearful experience of being enveloped and swept away by swirling dark winds of the end of an eon. What to do? When you're driven by the powerful red winds of karma and swallowed up by a terrifying darkness. What to do? When you're bound with a lasso by the messengers of Yama, the Lord of Death, and in total despair are led away. What to do? When you're tortured in so many detestable ways by ox and scorpion-headed karmic agents. What to do? When you're before the Yama King, the Lord of Death, as he weighs up the whites and blacks, your virtuous and non-virtuous actions. What to do? When Yama exposes your lie of having spent your human life in attachment, anger, attachment, hatred, and deceit. What to do? When at Yama's court, the punishment that is the ripening effect of your negative actions is meted out. What to do? When your naked body is stretched out on the glowing red-hot iron ground in the fires of hell. What to do? Though your body is cut to pieces by a rain of weapons, still you must experience it without dying. What to do? Though you're cooked in molten iron until your flesh falls away and your bones disintegrate, still you must experience it without dying. What to do? Though your body and fire burn inseparably, still you must experience it without dying. What to do? When your body is pierced by a freezing cold wind and cracks to 100,000 pieces. What to do? Having fallen into the miserable state of a hungry ghost with its hunger and thirst, you have to starve for many years. What to do? When you become one of those stupid, dumb, unfortunate animals that eat each other alive. What to do? When the unbearable sufferings of the evil-gone realms have actually befallen you. What to do? Now, don't be distracted with the sounds of hurrying, la-er, la-er. Right this moment is the time to steel your will. It's not only time, it's almost too late. Right now, la-er, la-er. Apply yourself with great force. Holy precept of the Lama, kind Father, heart of the authoritative scriptures of victorious Lopsang, practice of the pure path of complete Sutra and Tantra. It's time to place real experience upon your mind stream. Who's faster? Yama, the Lord of Death, or you in your practice of realizing the essence of your eternal dream, the welfare of both yourself and others, as much as you can each day. Unifying the three doors of your body, speech, and mind, put the whole of your effort into your practice. I like that poem. Sorry to put you through it. You weren't. Heart Spoon. Yeah. So basically, the reason we do this is so that when we come to the time of death, we have no fear. If we live our lives on automatic, and if we don't, think about things because we are creatures of habit, when we look at our own mind, most of us here would agree, it's not so well controlled. We're controlled by karma and afflictions. We don't know what's going to happen at the time of death. And so this is kind of like the one, the carrot and I call it the carrot and the stick. This was the stick. The carrot, really is thinking about the precious human life and what we can do with this life. the stick is thinking about death and impermanence, but really the whole sum of it, and the other two thoughts, thinking about karma, that our effects have actions, that all of the unwholesome things we do are going to lead to suffering, all the wholesome things we do are going to lead to happiness, and that at the time of death, what's going to come with us, it's not going to be our friends, it's not going to be our wealth, it's not going to be our body, it's going to be our habits, our mental habits that we've created, it's going to be our karma. So, we have all the teachings, we have everything we need to make our lives meaningful, so that at the time of death, we just can have no regrets at the minimum. And then people who are able to progress along the path, if we can get the three main causes together to have a precious human rebirth and do that, string those together, then life after life. The people who have really strong practices, like our teachers, for them, death is more of a picnic. It's just, let's get rid of this tired old body and get a new one, So then that would take away our fear. So the time to have the fear is to have this wisdom fear now. And then we won't have it, because we won't have regret. We will have used our lives, which is why there's no time to waste. So we try to do this moment by moment. And in one way that we do that is thinking like when things aren't going well and your mind is in a funk, is this the mind I want to die with? Because there's really no certainty that you're going to be alive in 2 minutes. I mean, you can't say you're going to be alive in 2 minutes. We don't know that, so. So then in the text, they move into karma. And they kind of remind us again that really why we're doing this is to eventually develop bodhicitta. And that clarifies for us what we need to do, but we have to first create the causes for that. And so, as Venerable said, at this point we're kind of in kindergarten wanting to be in medical school. So we have to create the causes to go to medical school. So what she's saying is that in that same way, we hold bodhicitta as this really just amazing and vast potential that we have. And it's very precious. But in order to create the cause for that, we have to start from the beginning of the path. And so there, the main thing that the Buddha said, after you, and the same way Geshe Sopa says it, as soon as you've kind of taken refuge at whatever level you have, the first thing you do is you turn your mind to karma. And let's see. When Venerable spoke about karma, I think in the book they talked about the four main, what do they call those? The four characteristics. But she really spent a lot of time first talking about intention, and that's what I'm going to just say a little bit about that. Because really, no matter what action we're doing, it's our intention that really colors the action. And in some of the tenet systems, this mental factor of intention is karma. So any actions we do with our body or our speech, we don't do them without having intention. And so this is what colors, it's the omnipresent mental factor. It's always there. We might not think that because we're not aware of it all the time, because we're just kind of not tuned in. Our mind isn't really, we haven't really cultivated a lot of times enough awareness and introspective alertness. But we always have intention. So when intention is what colors all of our actions. It ends up directing our mind. And so, for instance, if we're, say, angry, that will color the mind. and we'll start kind of moving, directing our mind, steering our mind towards actions of speech, like harsh words, being defensive, things like that. Whereas if we have the intention to have a mind of tolerance, then that intention itself helps the mind to be clearer, and then we can much easier move our mind towards being more accepting, more present. She talks about when you're more aware of your intention, you're really much more in the present as well. And so how do we go about this? It's always taught, because it's easier to start with the gross things, like the actions of the body and the verbal actions. The body is easier to control than the speech is easier to control than the mind. But even looking at it, that's why in our vows, our monastic vows, they're mostly actions of the body, the speech, and so as we learn to control those, since the mind is directing them, it kind of takes us back, and then we start to be able to see our mind more clearly, and then as we go even farther in the practice, we can much more easily see what our intentions are, our motivations are. So by doing that, with the understanding of karma, then we try to move towards not harming others, not harming ourselves, because we know that pretty much what goes around comes around. And also this is what informs our practice of purification, because we just take an honest look at ourselves and we look at our days and we see what's happening with my body, speech, and mind, and then we just put it out there honestly, mostly to ourselves, so we can clear out these things and start creating new mental habits. And purification is how we cut this karma. She talked a lot about karma isn't free will or predetermination, which was, I think, something that if people think, it's good for people to think about that sometimes, because if you think that things are predetermined, then you're really throwing out that things happen due to causes, that they're dependent. And if you think things happen from free will, I think the way she said it was, pretty much you're in control and can do whatever you want, whenever you want. If you think that's really true, then you've also really thrown out the interdependence of what's happening in any moment, that there are many causes and conditions that happen. There's a principal cause and many conditions. And I remember one time when she was talking about this years ago, she said, if it was true that you had free will that was that strong in the way, that, at least that she defined it, I want to see if I can say this more clearly. Free will, the connotation that things arise without being dependent. So you can just decide at the spur of the moment to do anything you want. It would be independent. So you could just decide, I want to be on the moon right now. That was the example she gave one day when she taught that. So, as Buddhists, we frame things more in terms of dependency and dependent arising and causes and conditions, and that's how we understand how things are functioning. And the whole point of all of this topic on karma, the main point is that where and how we're going to be reborn isn't something that we choose. That's the bottom line point for this section. We have that feeling, I'm going to cloud 9, I'm going to turn left, and I'm going to take this rebirth. But that isn't what it depends on. It depends on the kind of thoughts that are in our mind, what's ripening, what karma is ripening at that time, and then that's going to direct our mind to our next rebirth. So we're pretty much blown by the winds of karma. Okay. So then the last section on this, which I really didn't plan on spending much time on, but is very important, is the disadvantages of cyclic existence, which there are a lot of ways to think about it. I think the way the author summed it up was quite nice, because, if I can find it. Yeah, so he said, these 6 disadvantages, which is one way it's described, can be abbreviated into 3 points. Cyclic existence is unreliable. Whatever pleasures are enjoyed in cyclic existence are ultimately unsatisfying. And this has been so since beginningless time. So that's kind of the bottom line. You have to study these things for a while before you can sum it up, I think, that shortly. But basically, the way I use these 4 thoughts, just to close, is I learned something in studying for this time that was helpful. Because I've been taught these from the very beginning of learning about Buddhism. I've been taught these 4 things. And so I kind of learned them, and I learned them as a group, and then I learned the topics individually, and I've thought about the topics individually. But in getting ready for this, what I kind of did and I found useful is, with that background of having some intellectual understanding of the topics, using them as a thought training technique. So then when my mind was afflicted and during the day, I would just stop and just do like a glance meditation on these. I would even, just very briefly think about one thing about precious human life, and one thing about death and impermanence, one thing about karma, and one thing about the suffering. And it was very helpful to my mind. And so I think that that's a good sign. And this is how I think analytical meditation is supposed to work, in the sense of the way we learn in Buddhism is we first develop the wisdom of listening. So we read and we listen and we take in all this information. And then we have the wisdom of contemplating, which also includes discussing and debating and just kind of sorting out for ourselves what is the meaning of the teachings, of what we've listened to. And then there's the wisdom of meditating. And that's the point where you try to merge the teachings with your own experience, is how I would say it. And so by doing those repeatedly, many times, and we have to do it many times because our minds are very habituated and we rebel against most every topic at some point. We have to kind of work all those things through, and that's what's great about it. That's where you learn, in my experience, is where you have the problems, when the meditations don't work, and you look at why they don't work. That's where you usually learn the most. So then you come up to your problem of the day, and just kind of try to use this teaching to broaden your perspective and wake yourself up. I've always found that when I can get my perspective wider, because if you're attached or if you're angry, your mind goes very narrow. And any way I can get my mind wider is always helpful. And so that's, I think, the big point of these teachings. And there's so much in them that you can usually find something that will help to wake you up. And these teachings are what lead to renunciation, which is this determination to become liberated. This is kind of like where they lead to, these contemplations. We will want to be free because we will have seen the sufferings of cyclic existence. We'll see how we got to this. We'll see the cyclicness of it, how endless it is, and we'll want to be free. And then when we see that, and we just pick the ostrich heads out of the hole and look around, we'll see everybody else is in the same boat. And then we can move on to the teachings next week about developing bodhicitta. So we can think about everyone being free of this really unsatisfactory situation.